So my name is Carolyn Loftin. I am the Director of Housing and Family Services for Urban Hope. I am a single mom of 5 kids, and I was about 24 years old, pregnant with my 3rd child. And I was living with family who lived in this apartment unit that was overridden by critters. I had a 1-year-old baby, I had a 3-year-old daughter already, and I just was falling apart, kind of trying to figure out like what was going to be next for them. I ended up calling a homeless services hotline in Hampton Roads, where I was living at the time. Literally tearfully crying about when my baby was born, we weren't going to have somewhere that was safe and habitable for them. And that's pretty much where my interest in housing came about, because that shelter line was able to connect me with the shelter that then in turn helped me get into my own place and, you know, just start changing my kids' lives. I might be a little bit biased, but the 2 major ones that I see particularly is in housing and financial education to people who are living directly in poverty. Because housing is pretty much the root of everything. So if you don't have a stable place to live that, you know, has determinants on how, you know, what kind of job you'll have, how healthy you'll be, what kind of education you'll have. You know, home is your shelter. Home is, you know, where you have that safety and security. And if that's compromised, then everything else is compromised. And then financial management, you know, understanding, okay, I have, you know, these pieces, now where do they go? Normally, financial management is always geared to middle class and up. And a lot of the concepts are not relatable to people in poverty. So, you know, I feel like Ruby Payne's framework for understanding, you know, poverty or bridging out of poverty, she says, you know, people in poverty live for how can I survive till tomorrow? People in middle class want to know how can they survive for 30 days. But wealthy people are like, how do I survive so that my grandkids can have what I can offer them? That really stuck with me because financial concepts have to teach people, okay, what can I be doing in the short term to make it so that I can start to think of the long term. And there's just not enough information out there. And then, you know, back on the housing side, you know, there's not enough affordable housing, but then there are not enough pathways to get people to see themselves from poverty to home ownership. And so that's been my passion, is to help people understand both of those concepts. I think exposure is a big part of creating racial equity in our communities, being able to have communities where folks are exposed to different things beyond what they, you know, what the day-to-day is. I think one of the biggest problems with moving someone from public housing to somewhere else is because they see the same things every day, so they figure that's all there is. And so if we expand the exposure to different cultures, to different thoughts, you know, our folks could see themselves outside of, you know, what is normal day to day. To me, that's the biggest piece of my own journey, is being exposed to multiple things, but also being open to receiving those things. I remember moving from Columbus to Richmond at 9 years old, and it was a culture shock for me because I had never seen that many Black people in the same place, but then it was either you were Black or you were white. Living in deep downtown Richmond in Church Hill and moving to Henrico, I began to see the more Asian, the Cambodian, the Japanese families, mixed race families. And then to move to Chesapeake, where I went to a school where there were multiple options of what I could try, like ceramics and clothing occupations and drama, art, photography, like all of those things kind of expanded, like, oh, I could do a multitude of these things. Whereas when I went to John Marshall, it was either you were doing computer because you were going to be someone's assistant in their office, or you were doing some kind of sports. And it just wasn't a lot of options for you to even see, hey, there's something beyond, you know, what the school is offering. And I see that reflective now as my children are in school. It's either band, chorus, art, or PE. And that's like an elective for a typical middle schooler in Richmond. And it's like, no, there's so many more things out there. How are we learning to expose ourselves to other things so we can widen our imagination? One of the things that has been the area of my greatest frustration is education. Number one, we need to acknowledge our history. Because if we're not acknowledging where we've been, how do we, make plans and see, how to steer away from, what we've been through to bring a difference of where we're going? The city of Richmond specifically, because of who we are and our role that we played in the transatlantic slave trade, we have an obligation to acknowledge those truths in our school systems, not just Richmond, but Henrico, Chesterfield, and all the surrounding counties. That alone would be a major step into the right direction. A lot of our children have no idea of what transpired. They, when they go to these places downtown and they're having their fun or they're going to the parties at the clubs, most of them don't even really know that slaves were marched in, through that area. And so to me, I feel like education is big, because when I turned 30, that's when I learned all of that information, and that literally just blew the gate wide open. Like, dang, I've been learning American history for 30 years, and I've not really heard anything beyond Martin Luther King and, Black people that they share on Black History Month. When it became my understanding that there was more to it than an MLK or Rosa Parks, it just opened my eyes to think, all right, well, what else is there? What else can I learn? And I definitely think that's a right that we need to afford all our kids, and not just Black kids, so that the shame of what we did can go ahead and disintegrate, and we can start moving, to a better direction. But also, I think it would influence political decisions. Yes, there is Black on Black crime in communities, but let's talk about all the things that contributed to Black on Black crime being an actual thing. Like, you intentionally scooped a bunch of people, dumped them off in one place, and said, all right, you guys figure it out on your own, because we're not even gonna help you get out of that cycle. Good luck. You know what I'm saying? Like, having that knowledge of like the intentionality of how neighborhoods were disassembled, the craziness of just the exploitation of Black and brown communities, having that understanding, to me, it's hard to fathom that someone could know that information and still come out with the same thought process and results of life. So one of the things that I've been doing in my life personally is challenging myself to see from both sides of the fence. In my life, it has looked like being invited to tables that otherwise I would not have ever been at. One of the most recent and pivotal ones for me is the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust. And at first it was just a bunch of people gathered on the same mission of housing with the Realtors Association, the different housers in the community all coming together and saying, hey, we have a problem, now let's figure out how to do it. And at that table, people voiced their concerns and their, thoughts and just, their perspectives from where life had taken them. And even in that space, I was able to learn from other people, but I was also able to contribute, some of the things that I had learned. And so I think it's important to have actual tables that, people can come together, and us also having that onus to like say, to share our experiences. When you hear something off, not jumping to a conclusion, but asking for clarity, but then also saying like, hey, I hear you're saying this, but when you say this, this is how it comes across. And, people being open to that kind of critique as well. So, it's an interconnectedness that's going to be required from all of us to bring our best selves when we do come to those tables, but also be there to receive the feedback as well.